what would you do to restore trust in our police force?
In our police force? Well, I think some of the measures we're talking about, I mean, do you mean at a national level or a local level?
The suggestion was being made, which I must say I entirely agree, that the counter-terrorism agenda has been one of the main things that's undermined trust in our police force. That it's given powers that weren't really needed, it's seen police officers behave in ways that didn't seem warranted, no pun intended, and therefore trust in the police has been undermined.
Well, I certainly agree with all of that, and therefore scaling back some of these draconian measures like control orders, putting a bit of common sense back into stop and search. I'm trying to come up with a proposal which allows them to have very finite, temporarily limited stop and search power if the terrorist plot is regarded as imminent or has just happened. There's also an interesting former head of counter-terrorism command at Met that said to me, he said, the single most powerful thing that happened to increase cooperation, active cooperation from the Muslim community with the Met was when we had the first in the series of trials come through the court. And it's important to make this point. Talking about the justice system is not just talking about this sort of feel-good liberal agenda. He said that the sight, particularly after Forest Gate, when there had been all sorts of conspiracy theories running around, the sight of actual criminal accused going through court, the evidence being produced, was incredibly important to puncturing some of the myths about the police. And it was a very good wake-up call to me about how the justice system is part of the solution of the problem.
Just one other point on that. I mean, so I was not thinking, I think it's police rather than terrorism. So. But the other thing I do, frankly, is try and redesign their equipment so they don't have stormtroopers.
Absolutely.
All around here, you feel like you're in sort of Germany 1930s. Because just handcuffs, not just guns, it's all the kit. Now I can understand why the sort of health and safety element of policing is that you've got to wear a stab vest and all the rest of it. But I think actually making the policeman much more approachable in the way he looks, the way he's trained, the way he behaves, and say to the kids in the class when they're 7, 8, 9 and 10, if you don't know the time, go ask a policeman.
Yes.
When was the last time a child asked a policeman the time? Probably 10 years. So you actually got to get over that rather small but rather important.
Sorry.
Yeah, David, you mentioned the way that Tony Blair had overreacted and handed a weaponry to his enemies. And as we're in the Thatcher room, I think he compared very unfavourably to Margaret Thatcher, who famously at the Brighton bomb, she said the conference must go on, the conference must go on. And she quite rightly understood that when one's faced with terrorism, you have to keep the system going. I wanted to ask you, and Dominic, how confident you are that, say, in the wake of another atrocity, another 7/7, maybe twice the size, that this current coalition government would not fall into the same trap that Tony Blair did. And secondly, I'd just like to ask you, how much do you think the Labour Party has got the message that they got things wrong on this?
I think most of the Labour Party got that message, actually, now. Certainly Ed Miliband has got most of the message, if not all of it. The more difficult question is how would the government, because that's what it is now, the current government respond? And partly that's down to us. Ian Blair, the other Blair, once briefed on Chatham House, under Chatham House rules, a group of people at the Reform Club, saying, well, we're just waiting for the next atrocity through the next big PD and say draconian legislation. But that's what he meant. And this is the problem, because you face, if you're not very careful, a ratchet. And it really does rather depend on the nerve of the people who believe in freedom under the law. When Blair called the 90-day policy in August of that year, without telling his Home Secretary of the time, there was an interesting frisson that went through the Conservative Party. You may remember there was a leadership contest going on at the time. And every single party meeting I went to, somebody got up and said, if you don't support the Prime Minister in 90 days, you are supporting terrorism. And so, you know, I had a nice little sort of rant every single time. Which normally it was a standing ovation for me, but it wouldn't necessarily done so. And what we have to do is, if there is another terrorist event, and there will be at some point, we have to say, you know, how would 90 days have helped this? How would 28 days, for that matter, have helped this? You know, how will all the various bits and pieces of the state apparatus that we have put up have helped us? And the answer in most cases is it wouldn't. And the other side of this coin, and what I would say in sort of preparation to this, is that when the counter-terrorism argument starts to run again at the end of this month, when the CT review is put out, whatever it says, a part of that argument must be about the effectiveness of our police force and our agencies. They won't like us talking about it, but you know, the simple truth is, what the arguments that were put out about 42 days indicated was the Met didn't, forgive me ladies, know its arse from its elbow when it came to dealing with computer data. It really didn't know what it was doing. Why is it that technology always seems to help the other side, not our side? We're the ones with the money, we're the ones with the technology, we're the ones who can ring up Microsoft and say, give us a solution, please. You know, and yet somehow the problem's always on the other side. So we've got to start talking about the effectiveness of ordinary, common or garden forensic policing in solving the problems. And make sure that when this debate comes up, it's not just about the libertarian argument, it's about how we win.
Dominic.
I agree with all of that. Two sort of supplementary points. One, I'm not sure that, I'm pretty sure Ed Miliband gets it from what we've seen. I don't think Ed Balls necessarily does, and that would be an interesting one to watch. I think we are well placed, though, to rebut the Balls sort of tub-thumping agenda, if that's what it is, on the facts. I don't think he knows this subject particularly well. That's my impression. David said absolutely right. We can't guarantee there'll be no more terrorist attacks, and in fact, Jonathan Evans has said you cannot abolish risk. It's quite an important point that he's right to make. I'm very confident that if we do have another attack, the reason will not be if we scrap control orders, reduce pre-charge detention. It will be, as it is always shown to be, 7/7, 21/7, and subsequent plots. There's normally a failure of intelligence or coordination with the police, or some failure of the border to spot someone coming in who should be on the watch list. Those tend to be the two big issues. It's never, you know, we couldn't, if we've just been able to hold them in pre-charge detention for another week, we'd have known. It's never the issue.
Typically now, getting to the end of the night, everyone's got a question. So one hand here, one hand here, one hand here, one hand there. So we'll take them in that order, and unless there's anyone else got a burning question, those will be the 4 questions we end with. Quick questions and quick answers. Yes?
Dominic and David, I have a question about plea bargains. Right now there's an extradition proceeding going on at the Westminster Court, where the CIA have brought extradition proceedings against a British citizen who's a retired man, lives in Kent, cares full-time for his ill wife, and is the president of the local county golf association. So the 2 things that are holding up this extradition proceeding, which are supposedly on the ground of terrorism, one, that the CIA used entrapment methods against the British citizen, which is a method which won't hold up in the British court. And the second thing that's holding up is that the plea bargains that are usually carried out in the United States put undue pressure on you. Again, not something that's typically of practice in this country. So, what kinds of limits would you see? Would you like to see on the ideas that you'd like to import from the United States to be used in the fight against terrorism in the UK?
Dominic.
Well, plea bargaining, it's already, I mean, I think you know this already, it already happens, and that actually what you need is to regulate it and have it subject to proper judicial supervision, and we can have a debate on the discounts and all the rest of it. But the idea just to turn a blind eye to the fact that A, it's already happening, B, that it's a weapon and a useful one, I think is wrong. By the way, we definitely need a review of extradition to make sure we've got the proper balance between cooperation, and I'm very pleased that JCHR looks like it's going to look at this.
It's an extremely intelligent question, but nothing to do with the fact you work for me. The simple truth is, I mean, when you have plea bargaining, you have to put some limits on it, and the plea bargaining that the British courts are basically objecting to is taking a man away from his home, moving him a few thousand miles beyond any reach of his family, putting him in a strange prison in a foreign country, and then threatening to hold him there for a couple of years awaiting trial. That's not reasonable grounds for plea bargain, and that's not what would normally happen here. So that's really it. You just have proper rules, upright, straightforward, and transparent rules. Therefore, he understands.
Although you don't get that protection under a European arrest warrant.
No, exactly.
Yes.
My question is on a slightly different subject, on the impacts on private industry of all this sort of blanket anti-terrorism legislation. It's not just the inconvenience of having to get anti-money laundering permission to hire a lawyer. It's actually, if you run an internet company, the huge bureaucratic overhead that you put on your company simply for wanting to trade. And I just wonder what recommendations or what thoughts the panel has on unpicking that blanket approach to putting the cost of using internet up.
I will go to Jerry, who is a businessman, and to David, who was a businessman, then to Dominic, who knows a bit about business, and I shall stay silent.